Welcome to the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit. I'm your host today, Lindsay Kaplan. I'm the co-founder of Chief, the private network of women executives. It is my honor during this session to be speaking with Denise Hamilton, founder and CEO of Watch Her Work, Tenby Khumalo, founder of Brand Builder, Jan Mercer-Dahms, VP of Mayshed Group. This panel is called Breaking Through: How to Encourage, Mentor, and Champion Women Everywhere. So thank you to the organizers, the team at Non-Obvious Company, and the official summit hashtag is hashtag non-obvious diversity. So if you want to talk about what we're sharing, please feel free to chime in and use the hashtag non-obvious diversity. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment and reflect upon the history of the indigenous lands we call home. While we are meeting today on a virtual platform, all of us occupy spaces that carry the powerful legacy of these diverse peoples and their unique local cultures. Through this acknowledgement, we reaffirm a deep commitment to improving our understanding of America's shared heritage and recognize our collective responsibility to improve the bonds between all nations. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet you wherever you may be on your journey towards a more diverse and inclusive society so that we can do the work together. So let's get into it. I want to start with asking all of our panelists about your personal journey. Did you experience encouragement, mentorship that helped guide you through your careers? And did anything stand out that played an outsized impact to you professionally as you grew up through your different roles in your different companies? Jan, you're on top, so we're going to start with you.
Excellent. Lindsay, thank you so much for hosting us, and so thrilled to be a part of this incredibly important conversation. And I can't think of a way or a place I'd rather be in to kick off 2021 by doing this. So thank you to everyone who's a part of this, and I can't wait to hear what everyone else is saying on the panel as well. It's interesting because I grew up thinking that, if you worked really hard, if you kept your head down, if you stayed really focused, you would be seen and valued and respected. And so things like networking and building your tribe and thinking about sponsorship and mentorship weren't a part of my vocabulary until much, much, much later on in life. And, I think as we progress throughout our careers, we understand and value the importance of ensuring that from a networking perspective, from a how do you build your ecosystem and how do you build your support circle, that's one of the things that honestly I wish I would have learned earlier on. But with that said, I do think about mentorship in the way of all of those individuals and experts and people I really truly admired along the way who helped me at different moments in time. So I don't think back on my career as having one particular mentor, one particular advocate, but knowing that, life is really complex and diverse and rich, and there are different moments and different times. I think you need to find strength in who you find around you that you feel like you can really authentically be your true self.
Tenby, I know we're having some technical issues, so we're so happy to have you without video. Would love to hear if there's something in particular as you came up through your career that played an outsized impact to you, whether it was a person or a situation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I am based in Africa, and I see so many opportunities for us to be able to borrow some of what is good and helpful in traditional African communities that can help us in the workplace, particularly in fostering diversity and a more fair work situation. One of the most important figures in an African community is the aunt. And for me in particular, I had an aunt who changed the whole trajectory of my life. It was my aunt who persuaded my father that my sister and I should get into schools that were formerly white only. It was my aunt who suggested we should take piano lessons and participate in drama and extracurricular activities. And it was my aunt who declared that it was okay for us to wear earrings and makeup and do other things that weren't traditionally done in a conservative Christian home. And I think that I would love to see us developing more aunties, even outside the workplace, people that you can lean on, because we know that the workplace is competitive. and it's demanding. And so it doesn't always feel safe. But when you have someone who is even outside of where you are, it can be really helpful. Having said that, I personally got all my big breaks from women as I was coming up in my career. And I've been really, really fortunate and thankful for that. And in the one place where there wasn't a woman, I definitely felt the loss and the lack.
You know, it's interesting to think about looking for mentorship. We talk so much about what's happening in the workplace. Where should women go if they're uncomfortable in their workplace? They're looking for encouragement, inspiration, and they don't have an MD. Where should they go and look? Is it organizations? Is it finding a mentor? What advice do we have for those women who are looking outside of their own company?
That's literally why I started Watch Her Work. I was the only woman or the only African American in so many different situations. And people kept saying, can I take you to lunch? Can I pick your brain? And I literally could have had coffee 11 times a day, right? And I think it was because there is such a hunger for that role, for that mentor. And the truth is, far too few women have that mentor relationship, especially in their workplaces. And so we turned on the camera and we started filming women, thought leaders, executives, entrepreneurs, and capturing their advice and their experiences. You know, how do you ask for a raise? How do you tell your boss you're pregnant? What do you do if a client hits on you? And have built a library of about 7,000 videos, and we're adding videos all the time because truthfully, not everyone has access to a mentor. I think one of the challenges we have in our modern day workplace is we love these emerging leaders programs where we pick a small handful of people and develop them. But women can't afford that. We need to all be developed, and we need to develop alternative ways that people can get that advice and that tutelage in a space that's kind of on their schedule. You know, if I cry in a meeting and I don't know really how to handle it the next day, I can't wait 2 weeks from Tuesday to meet with my mentor. I need that advice right now, right? And how to navigate that space. And this expectation that the handful of women that are at the top of the tip of the spear in terms of leadership can mentor like the thousands and tens of thousands of women below them, I just don't think it's realistic. So we've got to develop ways to reach across industries, reach across sectors, geographies, socioeconomic groups, to make sure we're developing everyone. We've got to democratize access to great career advice.
I completely agree. It's one of the reasons that my co-founder and I created Chief, which was we saw so many women who were at the top of their careers taking on the burden of mentoring younger women that they were not taking care of themselves because they still need advice. They still need peer mentorship. So my question is, should men be obligated to mentor women? Have we put too much of a burden on women at the top? And should younger women also be seeking out not just aunties, but should they be looking, and should men be put into programs where they need to mentor women?
I love this question. I think it really gets to the heart of the matter of the richness of how we at Mayshad think about identity and the complexity of identity. And look, I think that we're simultaneously oppressed and the oppressor in so many different ways. And so what we really encourage women and men to do in companies and brands is to really think outside the box and get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. I'm sorry, let me say that differently. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable in the sense of understanding that you're not just one role, right? You play a complexity, you wear many different hats on any given day. And much of that has to do with those groups with which you identify. And so we used to think of, when we think of gender, race, and class, we think of these binary constructs. You're either male or you're female. You're either straight or you're homosexual. You're either this or you're that. But we know now is that there's so much richness in thinking about how you think about who you are and how you show up and who you want to be when you grow up. And for leaders within companies, no matter if you're a corporate executive or you own your own business, there's so much, I think, to learn and to share into value from understanding that it really does truly take a village. It really does take the multiplicity and the complexity of the richness of how we show up in our lives to really think through then what do things like mentorship and sponsorship mean. And Lindsay, you're absolutely right. I think that women are incredibly overburdened, particularly as we see the ramifications and the consequences of the pandemic. We know that women, far more than men in every different industry, are those ones that are being laid off and furloughed. We know that there's the extra complexity of what happens within the home once work and home become simultaneously occurring under the same roof. And I think obligation is a harsh word, but I think it's the duty of all of us in 2021 moving beyond to really show up in different ways, that we really truly are thinking about the lens of inclusion, the lens of diversity and equality in very different ways, and using that as a different sort of humanistic approach for how we move forward, and expanding the definitions of how we think about mentorship and sponsorship, and just lifting each other up, and not through that binary approach that we had in the past.
Well, many people have called the pandemic a crisis for women in the workplace. And I want to note that data shows that this crisis has hit Black and Latinx significantly harder than working white women. So I think a silver lining is that a lot of the ugly has been exposed and laid bare. And I think that we are now looking at different ways in which we can use technology to power communication. So what now? Where do we go from here, knowing that we've seen the worst and that we have some tools to our advantage that we can use coming off of this crisis?
I think it really goes back to the question you asked a minute ago about should men be mentoring women as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that mentorship is a dialogue, right? And the exchange, the reciprocity of that male senior leader providing that feedback. But guess what? That female up and coming emerging leader is also providing feedback to that man so that he can understand the challenges that are unique to women in these environments, the different situations that they're tackling, and how policy can impact their ability to be effective in these environments. So I think that the pandemic has been so incredibly destructive to just the state of women as it relates to work. But there is one silver lining, and that silver lining is we have removed the awkwardness of I guess we kind of removed the sexual dynamic. We've removed the awkwardness of intimate relationship that is always such a concern, right? I know a lot of male leaders who simply don't want to mentor women. They're afraid of backlash. They're afraid of having some kind of consequence to that. And while I disagree with that fear, but I can't tell someone how they can feel, right? But what we can see is that this can be an incredible opportunity, because we're communicating more in a technological environment, to talk more, to connect more, to have more intimate conversations about the future of your career. So I'm urging all of my clients to reach out to their the women on their staff, and to really dig into what's going on with them and how they can be a true support. And we need to challenge men to do that. And if they do that, that can be a real silver lining that comes out of this really dark time. People are establishing real relationships. They're doing it in a way that is kind of free of the politics of the day-to-day interaction of the workplace, and gives them a chance to talk person to person and deepen those relationships. So while there's a big culling of women from the workplace, I am slightly encouraged by the ability to elevate and deepen the relationships of the women that are still here.
I love that. And I think you're exactly right. So many men had said, or given the excuse that they did not want to be in a room with a woman, that, they don't want to get me too'd, and I'm going to use air quotes. There's really no excuse, right? Unless you're Jeffrey Toobin and you're caught online, there's really no excuse for not mentoring now, because you can be in a Zoom room, right? And you can record the whole thing if you're paranoid, men. So it's time to step up. I want to, as we talk about how women are stepping up, Thembi, you've sat on a lot of boards, very different size companies. What has your experience been, and what do you think it takes to get more women into the boardroom?
Yeah, in this instance, I think we have to be really structured and really deliberate about including women. In the first board that I was appointed on, it was a listed company. I was the youngest person there, the most junior, and the least experienced. So it was really, really tough because a lot of times I didn't know if I could ask what was going on. Only 3 or 4 years into the role did I start to realize through trainings and so on that some of the things that I didn't understand, everybody on the board didn't understand. So until somebody puts up their hand and says, I don't understand, or I don't know, then you're just kind of stuck in this cocoon of fear and very little confidence. So I think and because it's a board and a lot of confidential information is shared, you're hesitant to take it outside of that community to ask for help or clarification or whatever. So I think creating structures or partnerships on boards themselves or within organizations where somebody can be a mentor to, let's say, new board members, kind of walk you through or talk you through the critical aspects, and you can have the confidence to ask for help or clarification in a non-threatening space and where you won't feel like it colors your whole competence. That would be really helpful.
I think there is so much confidence needed in being somewhat inept. We cannot know everything. And so I love that. I think one of the biggest takeaways I've had since I've joined a board for my company is raising my hand and saying, I don't know what the hell's going on. And I've noticed the more I say that, the more everybody else breathes out and says, we don't know what's going on either. So I think there's a lot of performative behavior in some of these rooms that we are all used to. As I think through what it takes to get more women driven into the C-suite, I look at the data that shows only 18% of women that are in this VP through CEO position are BIPOC. So I'm curious, how do we ensure that we can take steps and create initiatives for women that are not just perpetuating white feminism, that truly are inclusive and brings more women of color into the C-suite?
Well, I think we've taken a really big, important first step. It's a real problem. It's not imagined. We have to stop gaslighting people when they present their concerns and their feedback about this topic. Like, this is a real challenge that we have. And I personally have the belief that we need to adopt kind of a scaffolding approach. When I say scaffolding, what I mean is we have seen countless members of the tech community, I won't name names, that are awkward, poor communicators, have terrible communication skills. You'll know who I'm talking about. And I'm always challenged when people say, you know, these people are so amazing and so brilliant and so wonderful. And that very well may be true, but they didn't have the full skill set to get to where they are today. They were scaffolded. They put the right people, the right resources, the right team around them to kind of compensate for the places that they struggled, and that allowed them to be incredibly successful, right? And I just think that's the approach that we're going to have to start to take. We have to understand that we have social forces, different sociological beliefs and practices and cultures that create this gap. And you can't be intentionally exclusive for hundreds of years and then be accidentally inclusive. You have to be deliberate and intentional about it. So what do our BIPOC future leaders need? What do they need? Get in there, diagnose that need, and let's be more tailored in our approach of elevating them to leadership opportunities. And, you know, where I do most of my work is I really work with white male leaders more than I work with women these days. And the why I kind of made that switch was because we have to change that mindset. We have to get in here and say, you know, just because this is the way things have been, it doesn't mean this is the way they should be going forward. So this this idea of pattern matching and fit, and how does this person kind of blend into the culture? We've got to challenge every single assumption, every single one. Something as simple as giving preference to people because they have a sexy internship. Who cares if you have a sexy internship? Right? How did most people get their great, wonderful internship? They had a relationship. Their mom made a call. Their dad made a call. A family friend made a call for them. That is not a thing, right? The fact that I don't have that experience doesn't mean I'm not a valuable potential employee, a valuable potential contributor to this environment. So we have all of these totems in our organizations, these things, that these sacred cows that we've set up, that we have to have the courage to kind of dismantle and challenge and flip and rearrange and reimagine if we're going to actually create true trajectory for leadership. You can't do this accidentally. You got to step in with a scaffolding approach that to some may feel heavy-handed, but when you have a big problem, you have to do big things to address it.
Well, all of you are doing such powerful things leading towards action, changing people's perception, and changing the way that they see themselves. So, as you know, this is a conference dedicated to going beyond the conversation and providing actionable advice for the audience. So I want to start a dialogue around the best insights and the best advice you could give that people who are watching right now could take away some steps to create immediate change. And I want to start with, we often talk around the steps that the women can take. I think this has been a really fascinating conversation because we've talked a lot around burden's been on the women. What are steps that we think that cis white men in the office need to take in order to champion women in the workplace?
I think a big part of that is understanding implicit bias and understanding the ways in which our own assumptions, our own socialization processes, our own circles and spheres of influences have really impacted and affected how we approach the world and how we view others, and use that as a starting framework. I think that there's also something that we also don't take into consideration often, is that women have tremendous purchasing power. And if we had different ways and different avenues of sharing content, sharing information, sharing data in a way that really ensured that we were spending and investing and saving money with those companies that were really doing tremendously good things to advance DEI platforms right now, that's also a different sort of way where I think that we as women can also speak with our hearts and our minds and align how we associate with the world with our values as well.
Tenby, what about you? What are the steps that we can take right now that the men in the office should be taking?
I think men can realize that actually supporting more women is good for their personal brands. And I think that anybody who is driven to pursue a particular career trajectory has to be conscious of what erodes and what adds to his personal brand and his brand equity. So getting that understanding that actually it benefits you to be good to me
make it
is going to be
selfish.
something. Yeah, exactly.
Are there any books, podcasts, media that you would suggest that men read as we talk about implicit bias, as we talk about their personal brand? What could we add to their reading list right now? And it could be an author, could be conversations. They should attend this conference. That's my suggestion. Just send them the recording.
Definitely the best one.
Definitely. And shameless plug, I'll have to say 18% of our audience at Watch Her Work are men. And I think it's male managers that want to understand how women think and what the challenges are. And I get a lot of feedback that they're educated simply by hearing women discuss what the challenges are in their own words. So I think this kind of like violent, really radical listening and being committed to that and not dismissing things that may feel trivial to you, but they feel so important to us, and putting themselves in these spaces. I mean, how often are we the only woman in a room? I'm sure everyone on this call has had that experience all the time. And I always challenge the leaders I work with, you need to go to some women's conferences. You need to hear the topics that they're talking about and dig in and get to know the thought leaders that influence those spaces, so you can understand how that bridge can be created.
I love that. Chief is an organization for executive women, and we once in a while open up workshops and allow our members to bring in a +1. And when we see some men come in, it is just a monumental change in the way that they approach DEI, the way that they approach women in the workplace and mentorship. So what are some actions that companies should take? What is some infrastructure that they should put in place to make sure that there is diversity, equity, and inclusion within their workplace? Jan?
I want to go back to the previous question and add something that I think would be an incredible frame of reference for how we think about not just how as we heal as a country, but the ways in which I think many points of the conversation we've had so far today really impact thinking about just the United States through a different lens. And it's Howard Zinn's History of the People of the United States. It's an old book, but it really, truly, if you grew up in the United States and you went to school and your history classes, these are things that were probably overshadowed. Like, for example, Christopher Columbus discovering America. Well, we knew that there were already people here in this country, but how often do we actually hear the truth of that story and the nuances of that? So I would highly, for everyone watching this today, I would highly recommend, if you haven't already, read Howard Zinn's work. And another thing I think that, for the men that are watching this today, I would also encourage all of us, all of you, to think about how do you find and recruit and retain talent? Where do you find companies to invest in? Where do you find brands to support and clients to hire, and et cetera, and start to look in different places and walk away from the assumption that, well, women just don't exist, or I just don't know how to find them, or I can't tell you the number of VCs who have actually said to me, well, we'd love to invest in female-founded companies, but there just aren't any out there, right? So really move beyond thinking in that approach that, yes, you may not know because your network and your ecosystem is traditionally looks like you, which is, human nature. We often surround ourselves with people that we think look like us and act like us and believe in the things that we believe in. We really use this time to get very uncomfortable with playing outside the sandbox and asking for help in the same way that I think that, women could gain tremendous value in us understanding how to ask for help in different ways. I think that, that many men who are watching this can also think through that in the sense of just really understanding how to ask for help in different ways as well.
I just want to follow on from something Jan said. When you say you can't find women, part of the problem is that we're not spotlighting them enough. So one of the things that we can do is to highlight and spotlight the women in our organizations that are doing well, and that serves two purposes. It serves the purpose of ensuring that the pool of available talent is visible, but it also serves the purpose of creating aspiration, because as up and coming leaders are growing in their careers, you want them to want to lead. And they get to want to lead because they can see what it looks like and it looks great. But if they never see, how do you want to become something that you don't see? And in the same vein, I would then say, as women, we need to start saying yes a lot more. As when I was writing a column for a newspaper for many years, and it was so hard to find women that would agree to be interviewed or to be spotlighted. Suddenly they were very private people. They had all these reservations. They didn't want to be known and talked about. So we definitely have to get away from that thinking as well, so that we can deliver a community of women that are aspirational and valuable on all sides.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with you. I think that companies and brands have a vested interest in helping all of their employees at all different levels of an organization become their best brand ambassadors, and doing that by really encouraging women to do what we're doing, having this conversation like what we're having today, like help your female executives and female employees at all different levels of the company really provide opportunities to be seen and heard and valued in different ways, because honestly, that helps to build your own brand equity as well. Lindsay, one of the things that you had mentioned that I wanted to go back to as well is that, I think that there's tremendous value in reframing the conversation around how companies think about their employee resource groups, their affinity groups, their ERGs, and having those become much more inclusive and diverse as well, so that it's not just an expectation that, women in a company join a group that's just for them, or people of color join a group that's just for them, or the LGBT community joining a group that's just for them, because in a way, doesn't that kind of reify and reinforce the silos? So what if there was a different sort of approach to that, where companies are honestly having different types of conversations that really, in an authentic, trusted, safe space, you can actually start to have conversations around implicit bias, around so many of those other issues that I think so many of us are grappling with today, particularly in the spirit of the pandemic, and the new ways in which we want to ensure that women and people of color are not getting left behind through the functionality of remote work, for example, or the fact that, so many of us are having to, do the third shift now and at home and work as well, and trying to balance that. And so ensuring that employers really have the tools and the resources and the experts and the advisors like all of us around them to really be able to champion women in the workplace, and understanding that there's just so much that we don't know, right? So much of how I think about, the ignorance around all the isms isn't necessarily from a place of ill will or ill spirit, but just helping people understand, if you haven't walked in my shoes, if I haven't walked in your shoes, that may be true, but how can I get to a different place of understanding what your day is really like what you may have faced in terms of challenge before you even show up, right? So a different level of empathy. And through those discussions now, and we talked before around how technology and how these little rectangles that we all show up in, provide us so much more opportunity to have different types of conversations and to be able to create safe spaces where, we feel like, I'm in your home, you're in my home today. So already we're dismantling some of those masks that we used to wear when we were together in the quote unquote real world.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that it's such a tricky balance, though, right? I think that far too much of our discussion around DEI is focused on the marginalized group and not enough on the dominant group. Like, the truth of the matter is, we have to create training structures that really challenge white cis people in these environments to adjust their framing, their thinking, and to move the idea of what it means to be normal, like what the homeostasis, what the status quo of that environment is. And that's just frankly the challenge of our time, right? So when we talk about ERG groups, and I'm seeing in my work tons more allies come into ERG groups, and it's a really delicate balance there, because on one hand, I love the idea of the education process and stepping in and creating rich dialogue. But on the other hand, these groups can be founded with the intent of supporting those marginalized communities and giving them a place to take that mask off and to have those authentic conversations. So I'm looking for that new product, that new service, that new approach that really focuses on developing, especially among white cis leaders, the educational path to learn about these things and to challenge the assumptions and challenge the approaches. You asked the question, what do corporate entities need to really work on? And I'll tell you what's at the top of my list. It's measurement, right? Because what you measure matters. And I think in a lot of ways, measurement, that what we've chosen to measure has harmed this effort, right? Which is why BIPOC women get left out, and white women tend to benefit disproportionately from most of these programs, because we're not targeted, we're not strategic, we're just counting like 2 by 2, like Noah's Ark, right? And so the metaphor that I would use is, let's say I'm evaluating you as a mother. You know, you give your child food, you have a roof over their head, they get enough water to drink, you drop them off school on time. You pick 5 metrics that you're going to measure to determine if you're a good mother. Well, you can do all of those things and be getting a straight A. But if you beat your child half to death every night, you're not a good mother, right? So we have to reassess the things that we're measuring and make sure that they matter. They're not low-hanging fruit, right? It's easy to do the Noah's Ark measurement approach. It's a lot harder to measure true efficacy in this space. And so reevaluating what we measure and what we count as a victory and what we count as a success, I think is really the first spot to start when you're thinking about how you approach your leadership of organization.
And Denise, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And for me, I envision, so many companies really wanting to do the right thing, not knowing what to do, right? And so they check it off a box and they implement something, they implement an initiative, they implement a project, and it's done, right? Like CSR programs were often that in the past as well. And I think that there's a different way to ensure that you're incorporating the work that we're all talking about into your overall business plan for the year, into your budgeting process, into your strategic initiatives, into just the way in which you embody and fulfill your vision, mission, values of your company, so that it's not just a one-off project, but it really fully is integrated into how you think about the lifeblood and the lifeblood of your business. And then Denise, doesn't that then get to a different level of measurement? Because you're absolutely right. Like the metrics of this have to be different, and it can't just be counting the number of women or the number of whatever the oppressed group is in the C-suite or on the board, but really truly integrating strategies into how you think about how is it going to really fundamentally alter every single employee's perspective and appreciation and value that they hold in the company, in their roles.
So what are some metrics that maybe are not measured enough that we should be looking at, that we can take right back now to our companies and say, we need to start measuring this right now? What are 2 or 3 metrics? And I know it's not easy to distill it down, Denise, or else, I could be beating my kid. Not literally, he's doing fine, he's downstairs. But what are some metrics that are less obvious as we talk about this summit and that are really key for us to understand? Is it asking people, anonymously, their comfort level, how comfortable they are even sharing ideas in the workplace? Are these some just more compassionate questions around how people are doing, or is it more metric based around just looking over, a 5-year trajectory and seeing the way in which women are climbing the ladder?
I mean, think about what we're going through right now in the pandemic, right? Something as simple as, is it rate the difficulty of doing meetings with your camera on? For men, turning your camera on is no big deal. For women, we're like our hair standing up straight. It's like, it is such a different toll on us because we have a disproportionate responsibility to care for the children, any aging parents. Like we are doing a 3-ring circus spinning plates here at home. I mean, from organizational perspective, is it a big deal if my camera's on? Why or why not? Let's explore that. Let's ask. Right? Let's ask how many of our employees are dealing with childcare issues. How can the company be supportive around that? Do we shift more to a deliverable kind of approach rather than a FaceTime approach? Do you need me on camera right now, or do you need that project done by the 21st? Right? Like we have to kind of shift what we think of as important, right? What we prioritize So wouldn't it be great if instead of talking about how many women left the workforce, in November and December because of childcare issues, shouldn't we have been asking those questions before and tried to figure out ways we could have supported them to stay in these environments, as opposed to just saying, oh, what a tragedy, they're gone, right? We know that we have these problems. So what are we doing to be nimble in our measurement and to ask those hard questions? And let's be honest, sometimes we don't ask those hard questions because we don't know what to do with the answers, right? How do we prioritize productivity and keep everything going while paying attention to the human needs of our employees? And that can be difficult. So we just kind of, do the see no evil, hear no evil approach. And we see the results of that, a mass exodus of women and a mass purging of women. I challenged many of the clients I'm working with, what are you doing on performance appraisals? How are you going to handle evaluating women who have these incredible challenges at home, in the context of doing their work in the middle of a global pandemic? And that was more telling about an organization's true commitment to DEI than any program or any brochure full of a Benetton ad that they put up. Do you care what your employees are going through? And that's not easy, but it shows the true commitment to DEI in the long haul. Who's going to be in the pipeline for the C-suite 10 years from now if we continue to have the purging that we're seeing right now and the mass exodus that we're seeing right now? If you care about that long-term goal, you've got to make some accommodations in the short term.
So I want to wrap this up by asking you, and I'm going to go back to the name of this panel, which is Breaking Through: How to Encourage, Mentor, and Champion Women Everywhere. I want to ask you for your actions that you would give right now for people who are watching this to encourage, mentor, and champion women. Which actions do you suggest that they take to make impact within the next 3-6 months? Tenby.
I would say if you're a woman, start saying yes. Say yes often.
I love that. Denise.
I think the quick advice would be schedule 5 Zoom calls today. Just 5 with people that maybe have caught your eye, that you think are interesting, that you really want to build deeper relationships with, and develop a hygiene around setting up these one-on-one conversations on a regular basis so that you can deepen those relationships. Never ask somebody to be your mentor. Let them ask you, because you presented yourself as someone that's really interested in what they're doing.
I love that. And Jan.
I would say a couple of different things. Number one, reach out to the men in your network, right? Like, don't assume that that they don't have time, that they don't want to hear from you. We learn how to ask for things in very different ways. Reach out to men, and picking back on what Denise had said, I love the idea of reaching out to 5 people every day. But ensure that when you're reaching out to people, you're picking people that don't look like you. You're picking people from diverse industries, from diverse professional and personal experiences, because that's really, truly how you're going to find the richness of it. And I would also challenge us not to think of it as mentorship, but think of it as a two-way dialogue, because I'm incredibly surprised with the women that we mentor at Mayshad. Many of them are Gen Zs, how much we learn from those young women as well. And so think of it as that dialogue. Something that Thembi said, I love saying yes, but I also, for myself, have learned how to say no differently as well. So ensure that when you say yes and you raise your hand to do something, that you really, truly do have the time and the motivation and the determination to follow through with your commitment and your promise. And ensure that you're also keeping that in check and balance for yourself so that you avoid the burnout that often comes with wanting to save the world, and ensuring that you're picking those things that you can actually fully, truly jump right in and have a significant impact, and yet also balance that for yourself so that you can also avoid burnout. So learn how to say no just as much and with as much enthusiasm and passion as you've learned how to say yes.
Well, I'm going to say yes to all of that advice. Thank you so much, Tendy, Denise, Jan. You've been watching Breaking Through: How to Encourage, Mentor, Champion Women Everywhere. This has been part of the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit. Thank you for watching. Check out all the other topics we are covering because we brought together voices from all genres, genders, and geographies. For more fascinating conversations like this, visit nonobviousdiversity.com. Thank you for joining in. Remember to mentor someone today.